Welcome to Japanese Sleep Whispers, your sanctuary for peaceful nights and gentle dreams. Here, you will find calming bedtime stories inspired by the timeless beauty and traditions of Japan. Each story is read slowly in a soothing voice, accompanied by natural sounds such as flowing rivers and the tranquil rhythm of shishi-odoshi. Whether you seek relaxation, relief from stress, or help falling asleep, these tales invite you to drift away into a world of serenity. Imagine quiet temples, moonlit gardens, and the whispering bamboo forests as you listen. If you'd like these soothing stories to be part of your nightly routine, consider subscribing so they're always with you when you need them. Subscribe and let these stories be your nightly ritual of calm and rest. Thank you for being here. May you always find peace in every moment. Twilight Reflections on the Pond. Prologue. The Mirror of Dusk. The pond lay still at the edge of the mountain temple, its surface smooth as polished glass. Around it, maples and willows bowed gracefully toward the water, their branches heavy with the hues of late autumn: deep scarlet, amber gold, and fading green. At this hour, twilight descended softly, weaving the sky into tones of violet and rose. The air was cool, carrying with it the faint fragrance of pine and the distant smoke of wood fires curling upward from the valley below. Ren stood at the pond's edge, gazing at the reflection that rippled faintly in the dusk. He had arrived at the temple only hours earlier, after a long journey from the city. His life there had been filled with noise, pressures of commissions, obligations, and expectations that pressed against him like relentless waves. As a calligrapher, Ren was once admired for his bold yet fluid strokes, the way his ink seemed to breathe life into words. But over time, the living spirit had left his brush. Each character felt like a hollow shell, technically correct but devoid of resonance. It was grief, too, that had driven him here. His father, who had once guided his early steps in art, had passed the previous winter. Since then, Ren felt as though every piece of work he produced was judged by an invisible presence, and each judgment came up short. He longed to find silence, to rediscover the spirit he had lost, and to reconnect with something deeper than the echo of his own doubts. The pond before him was no ordinary pond, or so the villagers had told him. They called it Yugure no Kagami, the Mirror of Dusk. It was said that when the light of twilight touched its waters, the pond reflected not only the world above but also the heart of the one who gazed upon it. Those who approached with honesty might see truths otherwise hidden. Those who carried turmoil would see their unrest magnified in its depths. Ren leaned closer, peering into the still surface. At first, the reflection was ordinary: the fading colors of the sky, the silhouettes of branches. But as his breath steadied, the water seemed to shift. He thought he saw a flicker of movement not in the trees above, but within the reflection itself. Shadows swirled faintly, rippling outward like the faint memory of something half forgotten. He blinked, and the water was calm once more. Perhaps it had been only a trick of the eye. Yet something stirred inside him, a quiet pull, as though the pond had opened a door that could not easily be closed. A bell tolled softly in the temple above, its sound rolling over the hillside like a wave of bronze. Twilight deepened, and the first stars began to shine. Ren lingered at the pond, watching as the day yielded to night. The water remained still, luminous, and endlessly patient, waiting, it seemed, for him to listen. Chapter 1: The First Ripples. The next evening, Ren returned to the pond. He had spent the day wandering the temple grounds, walking among moss gardens, listening to the distant chanting of monks, and tracing the worn wooden corridors of the old halls. There was peace here, though it was not easily absorbed. His mind still raced with thoughts of the city, the unfinished works he had abandoned, and the persistent doubt that he was worthy of carrying forward his art. Yet when twilight returned, he felt drawn once again to the pond, as though something within its waters called to him. The surface was calm, reflecting the deepening sky. Ren settled on a smooth stone at the edge, folding his legs beneath him. The air was cooler than the previous night, and a faint breeze stirred the branches above. For a long while, he simply watched. The silence was profound, broken only by the occasional call of a nightbird or the rustle of leaves. He felt his breath slow, his heartbeat steady. And then, a small pebble, dislodged from the bank, fell into the pond with a soft plop. At once, ripples spread outward in perfect circles, distorting the reflection of the sky. Stars wavered, branches bent, and the stillness was transformed into living movement. Ren leaned forward, mesmerized. A single ripple, born of such a small disturbance, reshaped the entire image of the pond. Slowly, as the ripples expanded, they softened, merging back into stillness until once again the reflection was whole. He whispered aloud, though no one was near to hear, "So little yet it changes everything." The words echoed in his chest. He thought of his life, of the strokes of his brush that once carried vitality but now felt lifeless. He thought of how his father's passing had left him adrift, and how each choice he made felt too small to matter. Yet here, a single pebble had reshaped the whole pond. Was it not the same with words? With art? With life itself? He closed his eyes and remembered his father's teaching: ink is not only black on white. It carries your breath, your heart. Each stroke ripples outward. Even when you do not see it, it touches more than you imagine. Opening his eyes, Ren took a small notebook from his sleeve. He had not dared to write since leaving the city, fearing the emptiness of his strokes. Yet here, under the deepening twilight, he allowed his brush to move. The ink bled into the paper, imperfect, hesitant. The first character he drew was bow wave or ripple. The lines wavered, uneven. He frowned at first, but then smiled faintly. Imperfection was not failure, it was evidence of life, of movement, of sincerity. The pond's ripples had reminded him that even the smallest gestures carried weight, Even the faintest marks mattered. As he worked, the twilight deepened. The pond reflected not only the fading sky but also the flickering light of fireflies emerging along the shore. They hovered like drifting lanterns, their glow soft and patient. Ren paused to watch them, realizing that each tiny flame, like each ripple, contributed to the whole. The bell in the temple tolled again, signaling the coming of night. Ren gathered his brush and paper, holding them gently. For the first time in many months, he felt a faint spark of warmth in his chest, not certainty, not triumph, but a beginning. He rose slowly and bowed toward the pond. The water, calm once more, mirrored both the stars above and his own quiet reflection below. "Tomorrow," he whispered, "I will return." And the pond, still and luminous, seemed to listen. Chapter 2: The Silent Garden. The following morning, Ren rose with the sound of the temple bell. Its tone spread across the valley like ripples on water, firm yet gentle, reminding all within earshot of time's quiet passage. He followed a path lined with stone lanterns, their surfaces worn smooth by centuries of rain, wind, and moss. The air carried the fresh scent of morning dew, and birdsong laced through the silence like delicate threads. At the far end of the temple grounds lay the moss garden, said to be one of the oldest in the region. The monks tended it daily, not to shape it into perfection but to keep it alive in its natural form. Ren stepped inside and felt as though he had entered another world. Soft carpets of moss glistened with dew, stones rose like islands, and winding paths invited slow and careful steps. He wandered at first, careful not to disturb the fragile growth beneath his feet. Everywhere he looked, there was stillness yet not emptiness. It was a stillness filled with presence. The moss, though silent, seemed to breathe with the earth itself. The stones stood like guardians, watching the passage of centuries without complaint. Ren paused by a stone basin filled with clear water. A bamboo pipe dripped slowly, each drop echoing in the basin before merging with the stillness. The sound was neither loud nor soft, but balanced, steady, timeless. He crouched beside it and realized he was holding his breath. "Do not rush," came a voice behind him. Ren turned to see an elderly monk, his robe simple, his eyes calm. The monk carried a rake, which he leaned against a tree before stepping closer. "This garden," the monk said, "teaches us what silence is. Silence is not the absence of sound. It is the presence of balance." Ren bowed respectfully. "I feel unsettled. Even here, my thoughts race. How can I listen to the silence when my heart refuses to be still?" The monk smiled faintly. "That is why you must sit. Sit, and let the garden speak. It does not need words. Watch the moss. It grows slowly, patiently. It does not strive, yet it thrives. The garden is alive because it does not force itself to be anything other than what it is." Ren obeyed. He sat on a wooden bench and watched the moss, the stones, the basin. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. At first, his mind resisted, filling the silence with restless thoughts. But gradually, he noticed the subtleties, the way sunlight shifted through branches, the shimmer of dew as it dried, the faint movement of ants carrying food across the moss. He realized that silence was not empty, it was full. It held the rhythm of life, too soft to hear unless one surrendered to it. Taking out his brush and paper, Ren drew a single character, Jing quiet. His strokes were unsteady, but he let them be. The garden had shown him that perfection was not necessary, presence was. When he looked again at the character, he felt a resonance. For the first time, his brush had captured not only ink, but a fragment of the silence itself. Chapter 3: Crane in the Mist. The next dawn was shrouded in mist. The temple grounds seemed transformed, trees emerged as silhouettes, paths disappeared into white haze, and the pond reflected only a pale, shifting sky. Ren wrapped his robe tighter and walked toward the water, his steps muffled by the damp earth. There, standing at the pond's edge, was a crane. Its long legs were half submerged, its white feathers glowing faintly against the mist. The bird stood perfectly still, head slightly inclined, as if listening to the hidden depths of the water. Ren stopped several paces away, afraid to disturb the scene. The crane's stillness was unlike anything he had witnessed. It was not the stillness of stone or moss, but of living presence. Each moment, it seemed ready to move, yet it chose not to. Its patience radiated into the air, calming everything around it. He remembered his father's words: a single brushstroke must carry patience. If you rush, the ink will show your haste. If you wait, the stroke will breathe. Ren watched the crane for what felt like hours. The bird did not waver, did not tire. Only when a fish stirred beneath the surface did it move, swift, precise, graceful. With a flash of its beak, it caught its prey, then returned to stillness as though time itself had paused. Moved, Ren knelt by the shore. The mist swirled around him, and he felt the pond breathing with him, the crane teaching him without words. From his sleeve, he drew brush and paper once more. This time, he wrote the character Oshi, patience. The ink bled softly on the page, its form imperfect but alive. He held it up, watching the crane through the thin paper. The character seemed to merge with the bird, as though the two were one. Patience was not merely waiting, it was the strength to be present, unmoving, until the moment called. The crane stretched its wings and lifted into the mist, its reflection rippling across the pond. Ren watched until both bird and reflection vanished. Yet within him, the lesson remained. Chapter 4: Stones in the Water. The afternoon sun lingered low, spilling amber light across the temple grounds. Ren walked back to the pond, his thoughts still carrying the image of the crane's unwavering stillness. The water was calm now, smooth as a polished mirror, reflecting the sky's changing hues. He bent down and picked up a small, flat stone from the shore. Its surface was cool, worn smooth by years of water and wind. Turning it in his palm, he felt its quiet weight unremarkable, yet steady. On impulse, he tossed the stone across the pond. It skipped once, twice, then sank beneath the surface with a muted splash. The ripples spread outward in widening circles. Stars, just beginning to appear in the fading sky, trembled in the reflection. Branches bent and shifted, their mirrored forms shaking before settling once again into stillness. Ren found himself holding his breath. It struck him, suddenly, how similar the ripples were to the strokes of his brush. Each mark he made in ink extended beyond the page, touching the hearts of readers, echoing into moments and places he would never see. He thought of the countless scrolls and letters he had written over the years. Some were hung proudly in alcoves, others were tucked away in forgotten drawers. Yet all of them, in their own way, carried ripples. Some were inspired, some comforted, and others were forgotten. But each had left something behind, however faint. Ren crouched near the edge of the pond and let another stone fall into his palm. He weighed it carefully, then set it back down. Not every stone needs to be thrown. Not every stroke needs to be made. But when one is given, it matters. He reached for his brush and paper, writing a new character, Shang Resonance. The strokes came easier now, flowing more freely than before. The character looked uneven, yet alive. He smiled faintly. The pond whispered back to him with its ripples, teaching that each gesture, whether a stone, a brushstroke, or a word, was more than itself. It was part of a web, extending outward, touching others unseen. Ren bowed to the water, feeling gratitude. The pond did not lecture, it simply reflected. But in its quiet reflections, truths became clear. Chapter 5: The Lantern Festival. Twilight arrived with the sound of laughter and footsteps. Ren followed the trail of villagers making their way toward the pond, each carrying a paper lantern glowing softly from within. Children clutched them with both hands, while elders carried theirs with practiced grace. The air was filled with the scent of pine smoke and sweet rice cakes, offered at the temple earlier that day. Ren learned from a monk that once each autumn, the villagers gathered for the Mizu-Akari, the festival of water light. They wrote prayers and wishes on lanterns, setting them adrift upon the pond as twilight fell. Each lantern became a small flame of memory and hope, carried gently by the water's current. The pond, usually silent and still, became a living constellation. Dozens, then hundreds of lanterns floated upon its surface, their reflections shimmering like stars that had fallen into the water. The villagers' voices quieted, reverence spreading among them as they watched their lights drift slowly across the pond. Ren was handed a lantern of his own. At first, he hesitated. What could he write? His heart was tangled with grief for his father, doubt in his art, and uncertainty about his path. Yet as he looked around, he saw the villagers writing simple things: thanks for the harvest, prayers for health, remembrance of ancestors. None were grand, but all were sincere. He took his brush and wrote only one character: con gratitude. Placing the lantern gently on the water, he watched it join the others, drifting slowly toward the center of the pond. Its reflection shimmered, merging with those around it until it was no longer alone but part of a greater whole. Something shifted in his chest as he watched. He realized that grief, too, could drift like a lantern, acknowledged, honored, then allowed to move forward with the current of life. His father was gone, but his lessons remained, carried like ripples, like lantern light upon water. The villagers stood together in silence as the lanterns spread across the pond, filling it with golden light. The trees bowed overhead, their branches cradling the reflections. The world itself seemed to pause, listening to the quiet harmony between flame, water, and sky. Ren closed his eyes, breathing deeply. For the first time since his arrival, he felt not like an outsider or a wanderer, but like part of the circle. His lantern drifted among theirs, carrying gratitude into the night. When he opened his eyes again, the pond glowed brighter than the stars. It was as if heaven had descended into the water, each lantern a heartbeat, each reflection a song. And Ren whispered, almost to himself, "This is harmony, not mine alone, but shared." The pond, radiant and still, received his words in silence. Chapter 6: Shadows Beneath the Surface. The night after the Lantern Festival, Ren returned alone to the pond. The lanterns were gone, their paper husks collected by monks in the morning, their light carried into memory. The pond appeared as it had before, quiet, silver under the moonlight. Yet Ren felt a difference. Where the previous nights had offered clarity, this evening the water seemed heavier, darker, as if something hidden lingered beneath the surface. He knelt by the edge and gazed into the reflection. At first, he saw only the moon, glowing softly in the still water. But then, faint ripples appeared, though no stone had been thrown, no breeze stirred the trees. The reflection wavered, and shapes began to form in the depths. He saw his own face, but altered, his brow furrowed, his eyes harsh. The reflection's mouth moved, though he had not spoken. Words seemed to emerge in his mind, heavy and accusing. "Your strokes are lifeless. Your father's art was stronger. You have failed him." Ren flinched, shaking his head. He whispered aloud, "No, I came here to heal, not to be haunted." But the water deepened, pulling at his gaze. He saw again the countless works he had produced in the city, rows of scrolls that felt empty, the criticisms whispered behind closed doors. The faces of patrons who once praised him but now turned to others. The voice returned, "You are nothing without his guidance. You cannot create on your own." Ren's chest tightened. He wanted to look away, but the pond held him. His own doubts were reflected, magnified, and undeniable. Then, a memory surfaced: his father's hand guiding his when he was a child, teaching him how to hold the brush. He had felt proud then, every stroke alive, every character carrying joy. But over time, that joy had been replaced by pressure, comparison, and fear. Ren pressed his palms together, closing his eyes. The pond's shadows were his own. He understood that now. The water was not punishing him, but revealing what he carried. He whispered into the night, "Yes, I am afraid. Yes, I doubt. But still, I will write." When he opened his eyes, the ripples softened. The reflection calmed, and the moon returned, steady and whole. Ren bowed deeply to the pond. The shadows had not vanished, but he no longer fled from them. To face them was the first step toward harmony. Chapter 7: The Old Calligraphy Master. The following morning, as Ren walked through the temple corridors, he encountered a figure he had not seen before, an elderly man in plain robes, seated at a low table with brush and ink. His posture was upright, his movements slow but assured. Each stroke he placed upon the paper was simple, yet it seemed to breathe with profound life. Ren stopped, captivated. He bowed respectfully and said, "Your strokes, they feel alive, as if they carry more than ink." The old man looked up, his eyes clear yet softened by years. "You must be the calligrapher from the city," he said with a faint smile. "The monks told me of you. Sit." Ren obeyed, kneeling across from him. The old master dipped his brush again, drawing a single character, Shin Heart. The lines were unhurried, the form neither rigid nor careless. It was alive, as though the character itself breathed upon the page. "Calligraphy," the master said, "is not about skill or perfection. It is about sincerity. The brush does not lie. Whatever you carry within, joy, sorrow, doubt, will flow into the ink. If you try to hide, the emptiness will show. If you are honest, even broken lines will carry spirit." Ren lowered his gaze. "I fear that all my strokes are empty now. I see only shadows in my work." The master chuckled softly. "Shadows are not enemies. They are proof of light. Do not fear them. Instead, let them breathe through your brush. Only then will you be whole." He handed Ren a fresh sheet of paper and gestured. "Write." Ren hesitated, his hand trembling. He dipped the brush, letting the ink gather, and drew the character Yin Shadow. The lines wavered, uneven, yet when he finished, the master nodded. "Do you see?" the old man said. "It is imperfect, but it is true. That is enough." Tears welled in Ren's eyes. For so long, he had sought perfection, fearing his flaws. But here was someone who told him that honesty mattered more. The master placed his brush down and folded his hands. "Return to the pond. Let it teach you. But do not only watch its surface. Listen to the silence beneath. The pond holds not only reflections, but echoes." Ren bowed deeply, gratitude swelling in his chest. For the first time, he felt he was not walking alone. As he left the hall, the morning sun shone brightly on the path ahead, scattering dew into countless fragments of light. Each fragment sparkled, imperfect yet radiant. Chapter 8: Ink and Rain. Clouds gathered the next afternoon, heavy and gray, covering the mountains in a dim veil. By dusk, the first drops of rain began to fall, tapping gently upon the temple roofs and garden stones. Ren sat by the pond, sheltered beneath the eaves of a small wooden pavilion. The pond, which had been smooth in stillness, now quivered beneath the rain. Countless circles spread outward, colliding, merging, dissolving. The surface became alive with motion neither chaotic nor orderly, but something between, a harmony born of chance. Ren took out his brush and paper, though the damp air made the sheets curl. He wanted to capture what he saw the way each drop, though small, reshaped the entire surface. He dipped his brush, but before he could write, a drop of rain slipped past the roof and landed upon the page, smudging the fresh ink. At first, Ren frowned. But then, as more drops fell, he realized something. The rain was not ruining his work, it was becoming part of it. The ink bled outward, softening the edges of his strokes, merging with the rain into forms he could not have created alone. Slowly, deliberately, he began to write characters, letting the rain strike where it wished. The strokes blurred, but within the blurring there was beauty, soft gradations, tender flows, like the pond itself under rain. He wrote Yu rain, then Lu flow, each character transformed by water, no longer his alone. A memory stirred of his father again, not of teaching, but of laughing when a spilled cup of tea stained one of Ren's early works. "Do you see?" his father had said. "Even accidents can carry beauty. Nothing is wasted if you learn to see." Ren felt a warmth in his chest despite the cool air. He held the rain-marked paper gently, as if it were fragile glass. It was imperfect, yes, but also alive. Looking back at the pond, he saw that the ripples created by the rain were no less beautiful than the perfect reflections he had admired before. Both stillness and motion were necessary, just as both clarity and imperfection belonged to his art. When the rain eased, Ren bowed to the pond once more. Its lesson was clear: to let go of control, to accept what comes, and to find harmony even in blurred lines. Chapter 9: The Pilgrimage Path. A few days later, the monks invited Ren to join them on a short pilgrimage. They explained that once each season, they walked a winding path up the mountain to a small shrine dedicated to Kannon, the Bodhisattva of compassion. The journey was as important as the destination, for the path itself taught patience and humility. Ren accepted eagerly. With a simple staff in hand, he followed the line of monks as they moved in silence through forest paths. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of cedar and damp soil. Leaves crunched beneath their feet, and the occasional bird darted between branches. The climb grew steep, and Ren's breath quickened. Sweat gathered on his brow, though the monks moved steadily, unhurried, their steps like flowing water. Each placed foot seemed deliberate, respectful of the earth. At one bend in the path, Ren paused to catch his breath. He looked down the slope and saw the valley below, fields patchworked with green and gold, a river winding like a silver thread. The world stretched vast and quiet, humbling him with its breadth. As the group continued upward, they passed shrines of stone, small offerings left by travelers' coins, folded paper, tiny wooden figures. Each seemed a whisper of gratitude, a reminder that countless others had walked this same path before. At last, they reached the small shrine near the summit. It was simple, a wooden structure weathered by time, standing among moss-covered rocks. A spring trickled nearby, its water clear and cold. The monks knelt in prayer, and Ren followed. As he bowed, he felt not only his own weight but the weight of all who had come before him, each step carried by countless unseen feet. He understood then that his journey was not isolated. His struggles, his art, his grief, all were part of a longer path. When the prayers ended, one of the monks offered Ren a small stone from the shrine. "Carry this with you," he said. "Not as a burden, but as a reminder. The path is long, but each step belongs to it." Ren accepted the stone with reverence. Its surface was rough, unpolished, yet it felt steady in his hand. He thought of the ripples on the pond, the rain on his paper, the shadows he had faced. All of it was part of the same path, imperfect, but true. As they descended, the evening light spread across the valley, painting the world in shades of gold and violet. Ren felt lighter, as though each step carried him not only forward, but deeper into himself. When they returned to the pond that night, he placed the stone beside its edge. It was not thrown, not discarded, but set gently in place. Another ripple, waiting to be. Chapter 10: The Broken Brush. One evening, Ren sat in his small chamber, candlelight flickering across scrolls scattered on the tatami mat. He had been practicing diligently since his meeting with the old calligraphy master, allowing his brush to move with more honesty and less fear. Yet as he worked late into the night, his hand grew heavy. With one final stroke, the brush in his hand snapped. The wooden handle split near the base, the bristles falling limp against the page. For a moment, Ren simply stared, stunned. This brush had been his companion since his father's passing, the last brush his father had given him. He picked up the broken pieces carefully. The handle bore faint marks of his grip, the wood darkened from years of use. His chest tightened as if something vital had been torn away. Memories rushed in his father's hand guiding his first strokes. The sound of ink grinding on stone, the laughter when mistakes were made, the quiet pride when a character came alive. The brush had been a thread connecting him to all of it. Now it was gone. Anguish welled up, and Ren felt the old shadows return. "Even the brush abandons me," he whispered bitterly. He left the chamber and walked to the pond under the cold starlight, clutching the broken brush. Kneeling by the edge, he held it over the water. He thought of letting it fall, allowing the pond to swallow it whole. Yet his hand would not release. Tears blurred his vision as he whispered, "Father, what do I do without this?" "Without you?" The pond reflected the stars, steady and indifferent. A faint breeze stirred the surface, carrying ripples outward. Ren stared at them and slowly realized the brush was only wood and bristle. The true thread was not in the object, but in what it carried: his breath, his heart, his sincerity. With trembling hands, he placed the broken brush gently beside the stone he had laid earlier, not into the water but upon the earth near it. A resting place, not a burial. As he bowed deeply, he felt a quiet release. The brush had ended its journey, but his path had not. Chapter 11: Winter's First Snow. The next morning, the world was transformed. Snow had fallen silently through the night, blanketing the temple grounds in pure white. Roofs, lanterns, moss, and trees all lay beneath a soft covering, as if the earth itself had been given a fresh page. Ren stepped outside, his breath visible in the crisp air. The snow crunched softly beneath his sandals, each step leaving a mark that stood out clearly in the untouched whiteness. The pond, too, was altered. Its surface was partly frozen, with thin layers of ice forming delicate patterns along the edges. Snow rested gently upon the ice, while the center remained dark and reflective. The world above was mirrored faintly, blurred through the fragile surface. Ren stood in awe. The silence was deeper than ever, broken only by the occasional creak of branches under snow's weight. He felt as if the entire world was holding its breath. Moved by the stillness, he sat at the pond's edge with a fresh brush gifted by the monks. Its handle was plain, its bristles firm, new, unmarked by memory. At first, Ren felt hesitation, as though using it would betray his father's brush. But then he remembered the broken brush had not been lost, but completed. This one was a continuation, not a replacement. On a sheet of paper, he drew a single character: Yuki Snow. The strokes were bold, the ink dark against the white page. Yet somehow the character seemed to echo the quiet purity around him. It did not imitate the snow, it carried its spirit. He smiled faintly. For the first time, he did not feel burdened by comparison. His father's brush had taught him to begin, this brush would teach him to continue. He placed the paper on the snow-covered ground, letting flakes fall upon it. The ink absorbed the moisture, softening at the edges, merging with the snow. Once again, imperfection became part of beauty. As the morning sun rose higher, light scattered across the snowy landscape, dazzling and pure. Ren felt his heart lighten with it. The world was not only shadows and loss, it was renewal, quiet and steady, like the first snow of winter. He whispered into the cold air, "Thank you." The pond reflected his words in silence, its frozen surface gleaming with morning light. Chapter 12: The Return of Spring. Winter lingered long in the mountains, each day quiet beneath snow and frost. Ren continued his practice, writing by the fire, walking the temple paths, listening to the bell as it told the hours. He came to know silence not as emptiness, but as rhythm. He came to see each breath of smoke rising from a chimney, each crunch of snow beneath sandals, as part of a larger harmony. Then, slowly, the season shifted. Snow melted from the temple roofs, dripping steadily into the earth. Buds formed on branches that had long been bare. Streams thawed, carrying the sound of rushing water back into the valley. One morning, Ren returned to the pond and found its frozen surface gone. The water was clear again, reflecting the sky in its soft spring light. Along its banks, the first blossoms of plum trees opened, their fragrance faint but sharp in the cool air. Ren knelt beside the water, dipping his fingers into the thawed pond. The cold was sharp, but alive. He thought of how the pond had been still in summer, burning with autumn colors, frozen in winter. Now it breathed again with new life. Taking brush and paper, he wrote the character Haru Spring. This time, the strokes came with ease, as though his hand no longer resisted the flow. He did not strive for perfection. He simply let the brush move as naturally as branches releasing blossoms. Watching the ink dry, he realized that the pond and the seasons had taught him more than any master's instruction could. Each change was a lesson: stillness, patience, imperfection, renewal. His own life, with its grief and doubt, was part of the same cycle. Loss had been winter, now came spring. The bell rang in the temple above, echoing through the valley. Ren bowed to the pond, whispering, "Thank you for waiting with me." A breeze stirred the surface, scattering plum petals across the water. They floated like fragile boats, carrying the promise of renewal. Chapter 13: The Pilgrim's Gift. One afternoon, as Ren walked along the temple path, he encountered a traveler. The man was dressed in the simple garb of a pilgrim, his straw hat wide, his staff worn smooth from countless journeys. His sandals were caked with dust, his face weathered by sun and wind, yet his eyes shone with quiet kindness. The pilgrim greeted Ren with a bow. "I have walked far," he said, "and I have heard of the pond that reflects the heart. May I see it?" Ren guided him down the stone steps to the water's edge. The pond, in its spring vitality, reflected the blossoms and sky. The pilgrim knelt, gazing into it for a long while without speaking. His expression was calm, but his shoulders trembled as though holding a weight unseen. Finally, he sighed. "I have carried burdens too long. This pond, it shows me both my fatigue and my hope. I see not only the shadows of my past, but the light of my path still ahead." Ren listened quietly. He felt a kinship with this man. Both had come seeking reflection, both had carried sorrow into these waters. The pilgrim reached into his pack and drew out a small object wrapped in cloth. He offered it to Ren with both hands. "Take this. It has accompanied me for many years, but I feel it belongs to you now." Ren unwrapped the cloth and found a small inkstone, smooth and dark, worn by time and use. It was simple, but when he touched it, he felt a resonance, as though it carried countless prayers ground into its surface. "I cannot accept something so precious," Ren protested. The pilgrim shook his head gently. "It is not a loss. It is a continuation. Just as my steps end here, yours begin. Use it well." Ren bowed deeply, holding the inkstone with reverence. He felt the weight of countless unseen ripples it had carried, characters written, prayers offered, paths walked. It was not only stone, it was memory. As the pilgrim rose to leave, he turned once more to the pond. "This place," he said, "reminds me that our journeys are not solitary. Each reflection carries the echoes of others. May your art carry that truth." Ren watched as the pilgrim walked down the path until he vanished among the blossoms. Holding the inkstone close, he whispered, "I will honor this gift." The pond reflected the spring sky, petals drifting across its surface, as if in quiet agreement. Chapter 14: Echoes of the Bell. The temple bell had always been a constant presence for Ren, a deep resonance that marked the passage of hours, mornings, and evenings. Yet one night, as twilight folded into darkness, he felt drawn to it more than usual. The monks were preparing for evening prayers, and Ren climbed the stone steps that led to the bell tower. Lanterns flickered softly along the path, their glow warming the shadows. When he reached the tower, the bell loomed above him, massive and silent, its bronze surface etched with characters that had been worn by centuries of strikes. The monk assigned to the evening ritual approached, bowing politely to Ren before lifting the great wooden beam suspended by ropes. With a slow, deliberate motion, the monk released the beam. It struck the bell with a resounding gong that rolled out over the valley. The sound was not sharp but deep, vibrating through Ren's chest, echoing in his bones. The first strike faded, and then came another. With each toll, Ren felt layers of noise peel away his restless thoughts, his lingering grief, even his yearning for answers. What remained was stillness, vast and resonant. He closed his eyes. In that vibration, he felt the presence of those who had come before him, pilgrims, monks, travelers, each carrying their burdens and hopes. The bell's sound was not only of the present moment, it was an echo of countless prayers woven together. When the last tone faded into silence, Ren opened his eyes. The monk bowed again, but before leaving, he spoke softly. "The bell does not chase away silence, it reveals it." Ren nodded, though he was still trembling from the experience. He descended slowly toward the pond, carrying the resonance within him. When he reached the water's edge, the twilight reflection seemed alive, trembling with the memory of the bell. He whispered into the dusk, "I am not alone." And in that moment, the pond seemed to echo him back, silent yet vast, carrying the bell's memory across its surface. Chapter 15: The Summer Pond. Seasons turned again, as they always did. Spring blossoms gave way to summer's full radiance. The mountains grew lush and green, cicadas filled the air with their endless song, and the pond itself took on a brilliance Ren had never seen before. By day, its surface reflected the brilliant blue of the summer sky, broken only by the darting of dragonflies or the leap of fish. By evening, the pond turned gold with sunset, then silver under the moon. The water lilies opened their pale flowers, their fragrance delicate in the warm night air. Ren often sat by the pond in the heat of the afternoon, his brush and paper beside him. Yet instead of writing endlessly, he sometimes let the brush rest while he simply watched. The pond taught him to see not only movement but stillness, not only clarity but depth. One evening, as fireflies began to glow among the reeds, Ren felt something stir within him. The pond no longer seemed merely a mirror of the world. Above it seemed alive, as though its surface held all the seasons, all the sounds, all the memories he had witnessed. He remembered the first time he had arrived, filled with doubt. He remembered the crane in the mist, the lanterns drifting at the festival, the frozen silence of winter, and the pilgrim's gift of the inkstone. Each moment had entered the pond as ripples, and now the pond reflected them, whole and harmonious. Taking up his brush, Ren dipped it into ink ground on the pilgrim's stone. With a steady hand, he wrote a single character, "Hey Harmony." The strokes flowed naturally, without effort. He did not judge them, nor did he hesitate. The words seemed to arise not only from his hand but from the pond, the bell, the snow, the blossoms, the lanterns, all that had guided him. When he finished, he set the paper upon the water's surface. It floated gently, the ink shining under the moonlight, until the ripples carried it outward. Fireflies blinked above, and the cicada's song wove with the night. Ren watched as the character drifted across the pond, reflecting sky and lantern glow. He realized then that his journey had never been about mastering strokes or proving worth. It was about finding alignment with the world around him, with the rhythm of seasons, with the silence between sounds. The summer pond reflected everything to him, whole and alive. And Ren bowed deeply, whispering, "I will carry this harmony always." Chapter 16: The Brushstroke of Wind. Late in summer, when the cicada's chorus reached its height, Ren sat by the pond with brush and ink, yet found himself unable to write. His hand hovered above the paper, but each stroke he imagined seemed heavy, too deliberate, as if weighed down by his own will. Frustrated, he set the brush aside and leaned back against a pine tree. The air was thick and warm, carrying the scent of resin and the faint murmur of distant waterfalls. Then, as if in answer to his hesitation, a breeze stirred. The wind rippled across the pond's surface, scattering the reflection of the sky into fragments of light. Leaves rustled above him, whispering in unseen voices. A dragonfly darted past, carried briefly off course before regaining its balance. Ren closed his eyes and let the breeze wash over him. It was neither forced nor restrained, it simply moved, finding its own path. And in that moment, he realized the brush, too, must be like the wind. It was not meant to control, but to carry. He took up the brush once more. Without planning, he let his wrist follow the motion of the breeze. The stroke flowed across the paper, bold and free. Another stroke followed, then another, each one guided less by his thought than by something beyond him. When he opened his eyes, he saw not rigid characters but flowing lines that curved and swayed like grass in the wind. They were imperfect, even wild, but alive. A laugh escaped him, soft, surprised, genuine. For so long, he had tried to hold perfection, as though clinging to still water. Now he saw that the true brushstroke was like the breeze, fleeting, ungraspable, yet leaving its presence everywhere. He bowed to the pond, whispering, "From now on, let my hand be as the wind." The pond reflected the scattered clouds above, rippling in harmony with the air. It seemed to smile back at him, its voice carried not in words but in the shifting of light. Chapter 17 The Pilgrimage Within. As summer gave way to the first hints of autumn, Ren felt a stirring within him, a sense that his time at the temple pond was approaching a turning point. The monks spoke of a pilgrimage they would soon undertake, visiting shrines and temples in the valleys below. Ren considered joining them, but as he gazed into the pond one evening, he realized his true pilgrimage was not outward, but inward. He sat cross-legged by the water's edge, the inkstone and brush before him, and closed his eyes. He let his breathing settle, each inhale and exhale falling into rhythm with the cicadas' fading song. Images arose within him: the broken brush, the crane in the mist, the lanterns drifting on the pond, the frozen silence of winter, the pilgrim's gift of the inkstone. Each memory returned, not as fragments, but as steps along a single path. Then he saw himself reflected in the pond, not only as he was, but as he had been. A younger Ren, fearful and uncertain, stares into the water with doubt. And beside him, the Ren of now, seated calmly with brush in hand. For a moment, their eyes met. The younger Ren seemed to ask, "Have we changed? Have we found what we sought?" The present Ren smiled softly. "We have not found perfection. But we have found peace." The reflection dissolved into ripples, and with it, the weight of his old burdens eased. His pilgrimage was not a journey to distant shrines, but the crossing of a mist-filled path within his own heart. He opened his eyes to the pond shimmering beneath the twilight sky. A gentle wind carried the scent of pine and earth, reminding him of the strokes he had drawn in its image. Ren dipped his brush once more into ink. On the paper before him, he wrote the character Dao Path. This time, the strokes were simple, unadorned, yet they carried the depth of his journey. The path was not straight, nor was it without stones or shadows. But it was his, and he was walking it. As night fell, the temple bell rang, its echo folding into the silence of the valley. Ren bowed deeply to the pond and whispered, "The path continues within." The pond shimmered with starlight, holding his reflection as gently as it had held every season, every shadow, every prayer. Chapter 18 Twilight Reflections. Autumn had come in gentle waves. Leaves turned gold and crimson, drifting slowly to the ground like the passing of old memories. Ren walked the temple paths with the weight of seasons behind him, yet lightness in his chest. The pond, reflecting the evening sky, was a canvas of stillness and color. He carried his brush and inkstone, but did not immediately write. Instead, he observed the subtle movements around him, a leaf settling on water, the soft ripple it created, a dragonfly skimming the surface. The reflection of a distant pine swaying with the breeze. Ren realized that everything he had experienced, the crane, the lanterns, the bell, the snow, the pilgrim's gift, the wind had led him here, to this moment. Each event, each lesson, each reflection was a layer of understanding. He dipped the brush into the inkstone, letting it drink deeply. Then, without hesitation, he began to write. His strokes were slow and deliberate, yet flowing, alive with the rhythm of his heart and the pond before him. Each character seemed to merge with the reflection of the autumn sky, carrying light, shadow, and memory. When the final stroke was finished, Ren set down the brush and looked at the paper. It did not feel like a single work, but a culmination, an echo of all he had learned, a mirror of the path he had walked, both outside and within. He bowed to the pond, whispering, "May all who see this feel the journey of seasons, the path of the heart, and the harmony of life." The water shimmered, responding not in words, but in quiet, patient reflection. The pond, as it had always been, held both past and present, shadow and light, loss and renewal. Epilogue: the brush and the pond. Years later, travelers came to the temple, seeking the quiet pond where reflections lingered long after the world passed by. They found Ren there, seated beneath the pine trees, brush in hand, inkstone at his side. The pond remained unchanged in essence, though each season left its mark upon it. Spring brought blossoms, summer brought sunlight and fireflies, autumn brought drifting leaves, and winter brought snow and silence. Ren, too, had changed, lines of age etched gently on his face, yet a calm radiating from within. He greeted each visitor with a bow, offering nothing but presence. And when asked about his art, he would smile softly, gesturing toward the pond. True art, he would say, is not only what you place upon paper. It is the reflection of life, of seasons, of every step you take and every breath you breathe. Like this pond, it is still yet alive, simple yet infinite. He continued to write, each stroke an echo of wind, rain, snow, or lantern light. Each mark is a whisper of gratitude, patience, or harmony. Those who came to watch often left in quiet contemplation, carrying the resonance with them like lanterns floating beyond the temple. And at twilight, when the sun's last light danced upon the water, Ren would bow once more to the pond, whispering to himself, "The path continues within the heart, beneath the brush, and in every reflection." The pond, ever patient, held the memory of all that had passed and all that would come, shimmering with quiet, eternal harmony. The Fox's Shadow at Dusk. Prologue. The shadow beneath the torii. The mountains of Akigawa lay wrapped in the quiet of the evening. At their heart stood a weathered shrine, its red torii gate rising solemnly against the fading light. Villagers spoke of it in hushed voices, saying that when the sun slipped behind the ridge, a fox's shadow would pass beneath the gate, though no fox had ever been seen. It was to this place that Akihiro, a wandering painter, arrived at dusk. His sandals crunched softly upon the gravel path, each step slow, almost reverent. The weight of his pack pressed on his shoulders, but heavier still was the silence of his own heart. He had traveled far, carrying brushes and scrolls, searching for something he could not yet name. The torii loomed before him, its red paint faded and cracked with age. Beyond it, the shrine grounds stretched in twilight, quiet stone lanterns worn by moss. A pond reflecting the last embers of sky, and pines swaying gently as though whispering secrets. Then, as the sun lowered, the shadow appeared. It was not cast by any visible body. It slipped across the gravel with the swiftness of a fox, long and lithe, tail flicking behind. Akihiro froze, his breath caught in his throat. The shadow darted beneath the torii and lingered there, as if glancing back at him. A strange chill ran through him, not fear, but recognition, as though some hidden part of his soul had been seen. Then the shadow faded, vanishing into the dusk. Akihiro stood for a long while, gazing at the empty gate. The villager's words returned to him. The fox shows what lies hidden in your own heart. He bowed before the torii, whispering, "If you are here, guide me. If you are a shadow, then show me what I cannot see." The pines rustled, the pond shimmered, and dusk deepened into night. Chapter 1. Whispers in the Pines. The shrine grounds lay hushed, save for the wind moving gently through the pines. Akihiro settled beneath the eaves of the shrine to rest, lighting a small lantern by his side. Its glow pushed back the night only a little, leaving the forest beyond in mystery. He could not shake the image of the shadow beneath the torii. It had been too clear, too alive to dismiss as a trick of light. Yet how could a shadow walk without a body? The air carried the scent of cedar and earth. Somewhere, an owl called softly, answered by silence. Akihiro closed his eyes, listening. The wind's voice rose and fell like a breath, weaving through the branches above. At times, it sounded almost like footsteps among the leaves, swift, light, playful. He opened his eyes, lantern flame flickering. Beyond its circle of light, the forest seemed to shift. A ripple in the undergrowth. A flicker at the edge of vision. Shadows lengthened and merged, never settling. Akihiro's hand moved unconsciously to his brush. He pulled a blank scroll from his pack, setting it across his lap. Without ink, he let the brush trace lines in the air, following the rhythm of the pine's whisper. Curves like tails, swift strokes like paws, sudden turns like startled eyes. His hand moved faster, caught in the unseen presence. When he stopped, his breath was shallow. The scroll bore only faint marks where the brush had brushed dry across the surface. Yet in those ghostly lines, he felt something alive, something watching. The wind shifted again, and he thought he heard laughter, soft, fleeting, as if carried from another world. The lantern flame quivered. Akihiro bowed his head, setting the brush aside. "If you are here, spirit of the fox," he murmured into the night, "I will not chase you. Show yourself when you wish, and I will see." The forest did not answer. Yet the pines whispered on, as though keeping his words. Sleep came to him slowly, beneath the murmurs of the wind. And in his dreams, a fox ran across the dusk, leaving only its shadow to guide him. Chapter 2: The Keeper of the Shrine. At dawn, Akihiro rose to the sound of crows circling above the pines. The air was cool and damp, carrying the scent of moss and stone. He folded his blanket neatly, bowed to the shrine, and prepared to explore the grounds more fully. As he walked past the torii, he noticed an old man sweeping fallen leaves from the stone steps. His robe was plain but clean, his back slightly bent with age. The man paused, resting on his broom, and regarded Akihiro with sharp yet gentle eyes. "You are not from this village," the man said. His voice was weathered, like wood rubbed smooth by time. Akihiro bowed. "I am a painter, traveling in search of inspiration. Last night I stayed by the shrine." The old man nodded slowly. "The shrine welcomes those who come with respect. I am Itsuro, the keeper here. Few pass this way except during festivals." Akihiro hesitated before asking, "Tell me, keeper, what do you know of the fox's shadow?" Itsuro's eyes narrowed, though not unkindly. He leaned on his broom, gazing toward the torii where sunlight now fell. "Ah, so you saw it. Many do not. I saw a shadow move beneath the gate," Akihiro said. "But there was no fox." The old man chuckled softly. "That is the way of the fox spirit. It does not appear in the body but in presence. Sometimes as a sound, sometimes as a dream, and sometimes as a shadow. It is a guardian and trickster, both. It tests those who linger here." "What does it test?" Itsuro's gaze lingered on Akihiro, as if weighing his spirit. "The fox shows you what lies hidden in your own heart. What you fear, what you cling to, what you deny. It may appear playful, but it is never without purpose." Akihiro lowered his eyes. He thought of the restless silence within him, the doubt that had driven him from place to place with brush in hand. Itsuro resumed sweeping, his motions slow and deliberate. "Do not chase it. Do not fight it. When it chooses to appear, be ready to see not only the fox, but yourself." The old man's words clung to Akihiro as he bowed and continued his walk. The shrine seemed different now, less empty, more alive, as if each stone and pine root held unseen eyes. He knew then that his journey here would not be brief. Chapter 3: Lanterns at Dusk. That evening, the village gathered at the shrine for a festival. Children carried paper lanterns painted with cranes, waves, and foxes, their flames glowing like small suns against the deepening dusk. Villagers placed offerings of rice and fruit before the shrine, bowing reverently before passing beneath the torii. Akihiro followed, carrying no lantern of his own. Instead, he carried his sketchbook, eager to capture the shifting light. The shrine pond reflected hundreds of flames, each lantern swaying gently with the night breeze. The villagers began to chant a prayer, voices low and rhythmic. The sound seemed to merge with the rustle of pines, filling the air with quiet reverberation. Children released lanterns onto the pond, and the water bloomed with drifting light. As Akihiro sketched, his brush strokes captured not only the glow of lanterns but also the shadows between them. His hand moved quickly, tracing ripples, reflections, fleeting shapes. Then he froze. Among the lanterns, he saw it again, the fox's shadow. It darted across the surface of the pond, long and fluid, weaving between lantern reflections without disturbing them. No body, no sound, only the shifting outline of a fox, tail curling like smoke. Akihiro's breath caught. He glanced around, but no one else seemed to notice. The villagers continued their prayers, eyes on the lanterns. Only he watched as the shadow lingered at the far edge of the pond, pausing as if to glance back at him. He set brush to paper with trembling hands, sketching the shadow's form. His strokes were hurried, imperfect, but alive with urgency. By the time he looked up, the shadow had vanished. The chanting ended, and silence spread through the crowd as the lanterns drifted farther into the night. The pond shone with 100 small suns, yet Akihiro felt the weight of the shadow more than the light. Keeper Itsuro approached quietly. "You saw it again, didn't you?" Akihiro nodded. The old man's eyes glimmered in the lantern glow. "Then your test has begun." Chapter 4: The Trickster's Gift. The morning after the Lantern Festival was hushed, the air heavy with the scent of smoke from extinguished fires. Akihiro walked the shrine grounds, his steps slow, his thoughts lingering on the image of the fox's shadow weaving across the pond. When he reached the torii, he noticed something strange. There, at the base of the gate, rested a brush. Its handle was smooth bamboo, polished by no hand he knew, and its bristles glowed faintly red, as though dipped in the very light of sunset. He looked around. No villager was near. Keeper Itsuro was nowhere to be seen. Only the pines whispered, only the pond reflected the morning sky. Akihiro knelt and lifted the brush with reverence. The bristles felt warm to his touch, as if alive. He held it upright, and for a moment, he thought he saw the faintest trace of shadow curl around it, like a fox's tail flicking in mischief. His heart pounded. He had heard tales of spirits leaving tokens, gifts not given lightly. They were blessings or traps, depending on how they were used. That night, by lantern light, Akihiro set brush to paper. The moment the red-tipped bristles touched the scroll, the ink spread differently than before. Lines shimmered as though wet with fire, curves danced like living breath. He painted swiftly, pines bending in the wind, lanterns floating on the pond, the long, fluid shape of a fox's tail slipping between them. And when he finished, the image seemed to shift. For an instant, the painted fox shadow darted across the scroll, alive. Akihiro dropped the brush in shock. The image stilled, becoming once more mere ink. Yet he could not mistake what he had seen. The fox had given him a gift but also a challenge. Chapter 5: The Mask of Laughter. Days later, the village held another festival, this one older than memory. Drums echoed through the valley, deep and steady, while flutes carried a high, sharp song. Masked dancers whirled before the shrine. Their costumes were bright with reds and golds, some painted with the faces of gods. Others with the long-nosed mask of the Tengu, and some with grinning fox visages. They moved in circles, stamping feet against the earth, arms sweeping like branches in the wind. Akihiro stood among the crowd, sketchbook in hand. He painted as quickly as his eye could follow the arc of a dancer's sleeve, the tilt of a mask, the rhythm of bodies in motion. The red-tipped brush seemed to anticipate the steps, moving as if it, too, knew the dance. Then, among the dancers, he saw it. A fox mask yet unlike the others. Its eyes glimmered with a light too keen, its movements too fluid, too alive. The figure spun and leapt with laughter in its steps, tail flicking though no tail should be there. The crowd cheered, not seeing what Akihiro saw. To them, it was only another dancer. But to Akihiro, the truth was clear: the fox itself had joined the dance. The masked fox moved closer, circling him, its steps teasing, playful, daring. The laughter of the mask echoed, but it was not human laughter. It rang like the chime of unseen bells, rippling through the air. Akihiro's brush trembled in his hand. He painted the figure, lines wild and swift, trying to capture the impossible motion. Yet the more he painted, the more he felt drawn into the rhythm, as though he, too, was being invited to join the dance. Then, in the blur of drums and flutes, the fox mask stopped before him. It bowed low, mask tilted, eyes gleaming. Akihiro bowed back, heart pounding. When he looked up, the dancer was gone, vanished into the circle of masked figures, indistinguishable once more. The festival ended with cheers, villagers clapping, and lanterns swaying in the night. Yet Akihiro stood still, brush in hand, the echo of laughter lingering in his ears. The fox had tested him again, this time not with silence, but with joy. Chapter 6: Stones and Silence. The shrine's garden was unlike any Akihiro had seen in his travels. It was not filled with blossoms or bright ponds, but with silence itself. Moss spread in green carpets across the ground, broken only by great stones placed with a careful hand. Some stones stood upright, others lay flat, all surrounded by raked gravel that shimmered like pale water in the sun. Pines framed the edges, their needles falling softly, as though reluctant to disturb the quiet. Akihiro carried his scrolls into the garden one morning, seeking to paint. Yet as he sat before the stones, brush in hand, he hesitated. How could he capture silence? How could ink describe stillness? He set the brush down, listening instead. A crow called once and was gone. The breeze stirred, then faded. His own heartbeat seemed too loud. And then movement. At the corner of his vision, a flicker. The fox's shadow glided across the gravel, its shape elongating, tail sweeping lightly as if it, too, respected the hush. Akihiro did not chase it. He simply watched as it paused by one of the tall stones, circling it, curling its shadow tail around the base. Then it vanished, leaving only the stone behind. Understanding struck him slowly. The fox was not asking him to paint the stones themselves, nor the moss, nor the gravel. It asked him to see the space between them, the harmony of what was and what was not. With calm hands, he lifted the brush again. His strokes were few, spare, but each carried weight: a line for the stone, a curve for the moss, a blank expanse left untouched for the silence between. When he finished, he bowed to the garden. For the first time, he felt he had painted not an object, but a presence. Chapter 7: The Path Through Mist. One morning, the shrine grounds were veiled in thick mist. Pines rose like ghosts, their branches blurred into pale outlines. The pond's surface disappeared beneath a white shroud, and even the torii seemed half-faded, as though belonging to another world. Akihiro set out along the mountain path, seeking fresh air to clear his thoughts. The mist pressed close, cool against his skin, muffling every sound. Each step crunched softly, swallowed almost at once. Soon, he realized he no longer knew where he was. The familiar landmarks were gone, hidden behind walls of white. The path twisted, uncertain. Doubt crept into his chest. Then a flicker. The fox's shadow slipped through the mist, swift and sure. It darted ahead, pausing just long enough for Akihiro to glimpse it, then vanishing again. "Are you leading me?" he whispered into the silence. No answer came, but the shadow appeared again, tail flicking, guiding him deeper into the mountain. Akihiro followed, though unease tugged at him. The mist grew thicker, and at times he thought he was walking in circles. His breath quickened, fear pressing in. But then, faintly, he heard water. A sound of falling, rushing, endless. He stepped forward and the mist parted to reveal a hidden waterfall. White streams tumbled down dark stone, crashing into a pool below, mist rising from its spray. Moss clung to the rocks, gleaming with droplets. Akihiro stood, awed. He had wandered lost, yet the fox's shadow had led him here. He set his scroll on a flat rock, dipped his brush in ink, and painted. Not the waterfall itself, but the motion, the endless falling, the meeting of water and stone. His strokes curved and tumbled, flowing into one another, alive with the sound he could not silence. When he looked up, the shadow was gone. Only the mist remained, drifting like foxtails through the trees. But Akihiro bowed deeply, grateful. The fox had guided him not to a place, but to a discovery that even in being lost, one could find. Chapter 8: The Broken Mirror. It was twilight when Akihiro found the mirror. He had returned from the village, where he had sketched children playing near the rice fields, their laughter light against the sinking sun. The path back to the shrine was quiet, lined with pines whose shadows stretched long across the ground. At the base of the torii, something gleamed faintly in the fading light. Akihiro bent down and lifted it, a hand mirror, small and oval, its wooden frame carved with curling foxtails. The glass, however, was cracked. A single line split the surface, dividing the reflection into fragments. He turned it toward himself. His face stared back, but broken, one eye misaligned, his mouth jagged, his features split by the fracture. For a moment, he felt a chill. It was as if the mirror showed not only his appearance but the fissures within his soul. The fox's shadow flickered across the mirror's surface, tail brushing against the crack. A whisper stirred in his chest, though no words were spoken. See what you deny. Akihiro lowered the mirror, heart unsteady. He thought of his journey, his ceaseless wandering. He thought of the doubts he never named, the fear that his art was shallow, that his brush captured only surfaces, never truths. He pressed the mirror to his chest, eyes closed. "If this is your gift," he murmured, "then I will not look away." That night, by lantern light, he painted his own reflection, not the smooth, unbroken face, but the fractured one. Each jagged line, each split shadow. When the painting was finished, he did not see despair. He saw honesty. The fox had given him another gift, not beauty, but truth. Chapter 9: A Night of Rain. The storm came without warning. Clouds gathered heavily over the mountains, dark as ink. Thunder rolled like drums across the valley. Rain began in sharp drops, then in torrents, drenching the shrine grounds. Akihiro hurried to shelter beneath the eaves, clutching his scrolls. The pond swelled, ripples breaking the reflections of lanterns. Wind roared through the pines, bending branches nearly to the ground. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the torii in stark white. And in that flash, Akihiro saw it, the fox's shadow, darting across the storm, fluid and unbroken, as if rain and thunder could not touch it. Then it vanished into the downpour. Akihiro's breath caught. He could not explain why, but he felt compelled to follow. He gathered his cloak, shielding his scrolls, and stepped into the rain. The path was slick, water rushing like streams across the stones. Each step was a struggle, yet the shadow flickered ahead, guiding him. It led him beyond the shrine, down a narrow trail half hidden by undergrowth. The storm raged, yet the fox's shadow moved with grace, always just within sight. Finally, he reached a small hollow where the rocks curved to form a natural shelter. The fox's shadow slipped inside, vanishing into the dark. Akihiro followed, soaked to the bone. Within the hollow, the roar of rain softened, muted by stone. He set down his pack, breathless, and only then realized the fox had led him to safety. He lit a small lantern, its flame struggling against damp air. Outside, the storm raged on, but here there was quiet, a pocket of stillness in the heart of chaos. Akihiro bowed his head. "Thank you," he whispered, unsure if the fox could hear. The lantern flame flickered, and for a moment, the shadow curled on the wall, like a fox resting with its tail around itself. Then it was gone. Akihiro smiled faintly, warmth stirring despite the storm. The fox was no simple trickster. It tested, yes, but it also protected. And as he drifted into uneasy sleep, the storm outside became like the beat of a drum, reminding him that even in turmoil, there could be harmony. Chapter 10: The Dance of Fireflies. Summer settled over the mountains, heavy with warmth and the scent of grass. Cicadas sang endlessly in the trees, their chorus filling the air like a living tide. At dusk, the voices quieted, and the shrine pond took on a deeper glow beneath the fading light. That was when the fireflies appeared. At first, only a few faint sparks drifted above the water. Then more came, until the entire pond shimmered with floating lights. They rose and fell like glowing threads, weaving patterns in the dark, reflections trembling on the pond's surface. Villagers gathered, children chasing the drifting lights with laughter. The older folk watched in silence, as if recalling memories long past. Akihiro sat by the pond, brush in hand. The red-tipped bristles seemed to thirst for the glow, moving swiftly across the scroll. His strokes captured not the fireflies themselves, but their rhythm, the rising, the falling, the brief shimmer before fading. Then, among the lights, he saw it again, the fox's shadow. It slipped between the fireflies, its form flickering like another lantern, another spark of life. At times it seemed no more than a trick of vision, but then its tail flicked, scattering fireflies in a sudden ripple of gold. Akihiro held his breath. He painted the fox's movement, strokes wild and luminous, chasing after the light. And when he looked down, his painting seemed alive, fireflies glowing faintly as if the brush had captured their breath. The children's laughter echoed. The villagers' silence deepened. And Akihiro realized this was not only beauty, but impermanence. The fireflies lived only for a brief season, yet their glow was enough to fill the heart. The fox's shadow lingered a moment longer, then vanished into the night. But Akihiro felt it had given him a lesson to honor not the lasting, but the fleeting. Chapter 11: The Pilgrim's Question. A week later, a traveling monk arrived at the shrine. His robes were simple, patched with care, his sandals worn from many miles. He carried no possessions save a staff and a small bundle. Keeper Itsuro welcomed him, offering rice and tea. The monk accepted with gratitude, bowing deeply. That night, he sat with Akihiro by the pond, watching the ripples spread across the water. "You are a painter," the monk said, voice calm as still air. "Yes," Akihiro replied. "I travel, searching for what my brush cannot yet reach." The monk tilted his head. "And what is it that you seek?" Akihiro hesitated. He thought of the fox's shadow, of the mirror, of the fireflies. He thought of silence, storms, laughter, and fear. Yet words would not come easily. "I seek truth," he said at last. "But each time I think I find it, it slips away." The monk smiled faintly. "Truth is not a stone to be grasped. It is water shifting, flowing, never still. When you paint, do you paint the thing itself, or the breath of it?" Akihiro lowered his eyes. "I have painted surfaces. I fear I have not painted the breath." The monk tapped his staff lightly against the ground. "Then let me ask, if the fox stands before you, do you paint its body, or its shadow?" Akihiro's chest tightened. He thought of the shadow that appeared again and again, never allowing him to grasp it fully. He had chased it with brush and ink, but perhaps the chase itself was the lesson. "I do not know," he admitted. The monk's smile deepened, serene. "Good. Then you are ready to learn. The fox will show you." That night, as Akihiro lay awake, he felt the fox's shadow curl at the edge of his vision. Not threatening, not mocking, only waiting. And he wondered, was the fox listening to the monk as well? Chapter 12: The Red Autumn Leaves. Autumn came suddenly, as though the mountain itself had taken a brush dipped in crimson and swept it across the land. The path to the shrine was covered in fallen maple leaves, their scarlet veins glowing even beneath the soft haze of morning. Akihiro walked slowly, each step stirring leaves into small spirals. The air was cool, tinged with the faint smoke of villagers burning harvested rice stalks in the fields. Overhead, branches blazed red and gold, scattering light like embers of a quiet fire. He carried his scrolls to the edge of the pond. Its surface was layered with drifting leaves, each turning gently in the water's slow current. For a time, he simply watched. There was no rush. Autumn itself seemed to teach patience. He dipped the red-tipped brush into ink, though he almost laughed at the thought. Why use black when the world was already painted with such vivid hues? Yet when he laid strokes upon the scroll, the leaves came alive, their shapes simple, their essence caught in lines rather than colors. Then, between drifting leaves, he saw it. The fox's shadow darted across the pond, scattering crimson patterns. Its form rippled like another fallen leaf, darker than the rest, yet alive with motion. For a moment, Akihiro thought it was playing, chasing after the falling leaves as a child might chase sparrows. But as he painted, he realized the truth: the fox was not chasing. It was reminding. The leaves were beautiful because they fell. Their brilliance was bound to their impermanence. Akihiro set down his brush, heart quiet. He bowed to the pond, to the leaves, to the fox's shadow. "Your lesson is clear," he whispered. "Nothing lasts. Yet in the end, there is beauty." The wind stirred, carrying a flurry of red across the water. The fox's shadow vanished into the storm of falling leaves. Chapter 13: The Winter's Silence. The first snow fell in silence. It came in the night, soft and steady, blanketing the shrine grounds in white. When Akihiro stepped outside at dawn, the world was hushed. Every sound softened, every branch bowed with snow. The torii rose stark and solemn, red against endless white. The pond was frozen at its edges, thin ice catching the pale morning light. Smoke rose from the village below, a reminder of warmth and hearts, though here the air was sharp, each breath a plume of white. Akihiro sat by the shrine, brush in hand, though he did not paint at once. He listened. No cicadas, no birds, not even the whisper of wind. Only stillness. He thought of the garden of stones, of silence painted in space. This was silence made vast, stretched across the world. Could a brush capture such emptiness? He touched ink to paper. His strokes were few, restrained the arc of snow on a pine branch, the stark line of the torii, the curve of frozen pond. Between them, blank space remained untouched. That space became the snow's silence itself. Then, as he laid down the final line, a shadow crossed the scroll. The fox's shadow stood beside him, its form darker than the snow, yet gentle, its tail curled like a question. It did not move quickly, did not vanish. It simply lingered, watching him. Akihiro bowed deeply. "I understand," he murmured. "Silence is not emptiness. It is fullness unseen." The shadow flickered once, then faded into the snow, leaving only white behind. For the first time since his journey began, Akihiro felt no urgency to paint further. The silence itself was enough. Chapter 14: The Shadow's Challenge. Winter deepened. The snow grew heavy on the pines, bending them like old monks in prayer. The paths grew narrow, yet Akihiro continued his walks to the pond, painting when his brush allowed, breathing when it did not. One evening, as the sun burned faint and red behind clouds, the fox's shadow appeared more sharply than ever before. It stood upon the frozen pond, tail curled, ears pricked. For the first time, it did not vanish when Akihiro looked directly at it. Instead, it moved across the ice, step by step, until it stood no more than an arm's length away. Its form flickered, but its eyes, 2 points of dark fire, remained fixed upon him. Akihiro bowed, heart racing. "You have guided me. You have shown me impermanence, silence, truth. What remains?" The shadow's tail lifted, sweeping toward the torii. Then, without sound, it leapt, splitting into 3 forms, scattering in different directions. One toward the forest, one toward the mountains, one deeper into the shrine's heart. Akihiro's breath caught. He understood. This was the challenge to follow, though he could not follow all. Which shadow was true? Which was an illusion? Or were they all the fox? He stood trembling, brush clutched like a talisman. His chest ached with the weight of choice. Yet he stepped toward the torii, the path into the shrine's deepest place. "Even if you are only a shadow," he whispered, "I must walk where you lead." The snow thickened, erasing his footprints almost as soon as they were made. Chapter 15 echoes beneath the torii. Night fell as Akihiro reached the torii. Snow rested heavily upon its beams, but still it stood, crimson against the dark sky, a gate between seen and unseen. Lanterns burned low, their flames wavering in the cold wind. As he passed beneath the arch, sound changed. The crunch of snow beneath his sandals faded, as though swallowed. His breath still rose in pale clouds, yet he could no longer hear it. The world had grown muted, hollow, yet not empty. He set his scrolls upon the stone steps, knelt, and closed his eyes. From the silence came a faint resonance like a bell struck not with metal, but with memory. It echoed within him, deep and steady, neither word nor song, yet carrying meaning. The echo asked, "Why do you seek me?" Akihiro pressed his palms together. His voice trembled, though no sound was needed. "I seek not to own, but to understand. To see the breadth of things, not their shell." The echo deepened. "And if I am only a shadow?" He bowed until his forehead touched the stone. "Then I will honor even your shadow. For shadow reveals the light." Snow drifted softly through the torii, each flake catching faint lantern glow. And within that glow, the fox's shadow appeared again, no longer flickering, fleeing. It stood still, watching, its form solid yet untouchable. Akihiro raised his eyes. For the first time, he did not reach for a brush or scroll. He only watched. The fox's tail swept once across the snow. Then its form dissolved, scattering like smoke. Yet the echo remained in his chest, steady as a heartbeat. Akihiro whispered, "Thank you." And though no voice replied, the silence itself felt like an answer. Chapter 16 The Keeper's Tale. The days after the torii vision were filled with a strange calm. Akihiro painted less, yet he felt as though he saw more. Each falling snowflake carried weight, each crack in the ice whispered a story. One evening, as firelight warmed the shrine hall, Keeper Itsuro joined him. The old man's back was bent, yet his eyes shone clear, like lanterns that had burned many seasons. "You have seen the shadow," Itsuro said quietly, pouring tea into wooden cups. Akihiro bowed his head. "Yes. But I do not know if it is a trick or the truth." Itsuro chuckled softly. "Then you are not the first." He leaned back, voice lowering into the rhythm of a tale. "Long ago, before this shrine was built, the villagers lived in fear. Storms tore the rice fields, wolves prowled, and sickness spread. They prayed to the mountain, but no god answered. One night, a fox appeared not of flesh, but of shadow. It circled the village 3 times, then vanished into the grove. The next day, the storms ceased. The wolves left. The people prospered. They built this shrine to honor the fox, though it never showed its body again. Only shadow. Some say it is a messenger of Inari. Others, that it is the mountain's spirit itself. But all agree it shows itself only to those who seek with sincerity. Akihiro listened, heart heavy with wonder. So it has been with me. Yes, Itsuro said, nodding. But beware. The shadow is no simple blessing. It reflects the heart. If your heart falters, so too will its guidance. Akihiro sipped the bitter tea, warmth grounding him. He thought of the mirror, the storm, the fireflies. He thought of the monk's question. Then I must keep walking, he said at last. Itsuro smiled, lines deepening on his face. And walking is all any of us can do. Chapter 17 The Night of Lanterns. Spring returned, slow and gentle. Snow melted from the pines, streams loosened their icy grips, and plum blossoms opened, pale against the warming air. The villagers prepared for the festival. Every year, they lit lanterns for the fox, small paper globes painted with rice paste and ink, hung along the paths and floated upon the pond. That evening, Akihiro joined them. He painted his lantern with a simple design, a single brushstroke forming both fox and flame, shadow and light bound together. As night fell, the festival began. Children carried lanterns, their laughter weaving through the air. Elders chanted old prayers, voices low and steady. Drums echoed faintly, marking time. The pond shimmered with reflected fire. Lanterns drifted slowly across the surface, their glow scattering like stars on water. Above, the moon hung pale and watching. Akihiro stood by the pond's edge, lantern in hand. He lowered it gently, letting it float among the others. The water caught the flame, carrying it away, its reflection rippling beside countless more. And there between lanterns he saw it. The fox's shadow moved, sleek and graceful, weaving through the floating lights. It did not scatter them. It guided them, curling its tail around one, nudging another, until the lanterns formed a pattern upon the pond, a running fox, glowing in fire and reflection. Gasps rose from the villagers, some kneeling, some clasping hands. Akihiro's throat tightened, tears pricking his eyes. The shadow paused, as if looking at him. Then it bowed, just slightly, before dissolving into the lantern's glow. Akihiro whispered into the night, "I will carry your light." The lanterns drifted on, flames steady, each one a prayer, each one a promise. Chapter 18 The Final Brushstroke. Spring had given way to summer once more. The shrine, now warm with sunlight, seemed alive in a new way. Akihiro sat on the stone steps, red-tipped brush in hand, contemplating the scroll before him. It was to be his final work here, a culmination of seasons, lessons, and shadows. He thought of every moment, the shadow beneath the torii, the laughter of the masked festival, the fireflies dancing over the pond. The mirror that revealed his own fractured heart. He thought of silence, storms, autumn leaves, and winter snow. Each memory flowed into his brush, and he began to paint. Lines curved and intertwined like the tail of a fox. Strokes of ink suggested the ripple of water, the sway of pine, the drift of snowflakes. Shadows fell into light, and light danced with shadow. It was not one scene, nor one season, it was all of them at once. As he painted, he felt a presence at his side. The fox's shadow appeared, tail flicking, circling the scroll. Akihiro did not flinch. He continued, brush moving with quiet certainty. When the final stroke fell, he stepped back. The image was alive. It shimmered as if breathing, the fox poised within a world of movement and stillness. The shadow paused beside the scroll, watching. Akihiro bowed, whispering, "I see you now not as an obstacle, not as a trick, but as part of the path I walk." The fox's shadow lingered, tail curling, then slowly merged with the painting. A warmth filled the air, subtle and quiet, like sunlight through leaves. Chapter 19: The Fox's Farewell. That evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, Akihiro stood at the torii once more. Lanterns lined the path, each glowing faintly, carrying the memory of every festival, every lesson, every season he had lived here. He sensed the fox's shadow one last time. It ran along the path, swift and playful, weaving between the lanterns. "You have learned," the shadow seemed to say. "Not to chase, not to fear, but to walk with what is unseen." Akihiro bowed deeply, a silent promise passing between them. "I will carry your light wherever I go." The shadow paused at the torii, tail flicking in farewell, then vanished into the evening glow. Only the lanterns remained, floating and steady. Akihiro stayed until night fell completely. When he finally turned to leave, he carried the red-tipped brush in his pack and the memory of the shadow in his heart. The torii faded behind him, yet he felt its presence with every step. As he descended the mountain path, the wind carried a whisper through the pines, a gentle rustling, like laughter or a bell. He smiled, knowing the fox's shadow would always follow him, not as a phantom, but as part of the path he had chosen to walk. And in that quiet, he finally understood the shadow was never separate from the world, nor from himself. It had been guiding him, teaching him, shaping him until he could see not only the shadow, but the light it reflected. Lantern glow in the hidden garden. Prologue: The Whispering Gate. Beyond the village of Kagamori, where the mountains rose steep and mist curled between the pines, there was a garden hidden from common sight. No road led to it, and few villagers had even glimpsed it, yet stories spoke of lanterns that glowed thereat. Night's soft amber lights, drifting as if alive, and the faint whisper of voices carried on the wind. Akiko, a young painter, had traveled far from the city, seeking a place where her brush could capture not only beauty but peace. Word of the hidden garden reached her through an old calligrapher who murmured, "Some gardens are not entered by the feet, but by the heart." She arrived at dusk. The sky was painted with the soft colors of evening, and the last rays of sunlight glimmered through pines, casting long shadows across the narrow path. Ahead stood an old wooden gate, half hidden by ivy. A faint amber glow shone beyond it, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of moss and stone. Akiko stepped forward, heart pounding. The air grew still as she passed beneath the gate, and the world seemed to shift. She was no longer in a village, nor in a forest she recognized, but in a space that breathed quiet and stillness. Lanterns hovered above the paths, small lights swaying gently. Their glow reflected on the pond and illuminated moss-covered stones. And somewhere, she thought she heard a faint hum, like a bell struck long ago. As she drew in a slow breath, Akiko felt a presence neither human nor animal, yet alive. A shadow flitted among the lanterns, moving like silk on the breeze. She could not see its form clearly, yet its essence was unmistakable. It was the guardian of the garden. She bowed deeply. "I come seeking your light," she whispered, "and to see what cannot be seen." The lantern swayed gently, as if acknowledging her words, and the hidden garden welcomed her into its quiet mystery. Chapter 1: The First Lantern. Akiko wandered the garden slowly, the glow of the lanterns lighting her path. Stone steps led to a small bridge, where the pond reflected the amber lights. The surface was smooth, broken only by the occasional ripple of a koi gliding beneath. A soft rustle of leaves drew her attention. At the edge of the path, a fox-shaped shadow flickered. Its form was delicate, tail curling like smoke. It did not flee at her approach, but regarded her quietly, as if measuring her presence. Akiko knelt and set her sketchbook upon her lap. She had not touched her brush since entering the garden, but the lantern glow seemed to awaken her hand. Her strokes were tentative at first, light lines for the stones, curves for the pond's edges, soft flickers for the lanterns. The fox shadow circled, pausing now and then, its movement elegant and teasing. Akiko did not chase it, she painted it as it moved, capturing not its body, but its motion, its essence. The lantern nearest her flickered, as if drawn to the brush strokes, its amber light shimmering across her pages. For the first time, Akiko felt her art reaching beyond mere depiction. It had become a dialogue between her, the garden, and the unseen presence. Night deepened. The air grew cooler, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. Lanterns multiplied in her vision, soft glow multiplying across the pond, through branches, and along mossy stones. Akiko paused, looking at the sketchbook. The fox shadow had vanished, leaving only the memory of its movement. Yet in her lines, its spirit remained light, fleeting, and eternal. She bowed to the garden, whispering, "I will return." The lanterns swayed softly, their light like a heartbeat in the hidden space. Chapter 2: The Keeper of Light. The next evening, Akiko returned to the hidden garden. The old wooden gate creaked softly as she stepped beneath it. And once again the air shifted warmer, more still, as though the world beyond had been left behind. Lanterns lit the path, glowing faintly even before the sun had set. Their gentle sway seemed to guide her, leading toward a pavilion nestled among the pines. Its roof was moss-covered, its beams dark with age, yet it stood with quiet dignity. There, seated upon a worn wooden bench, was an elderly man. His robe was plain gray, but his posture was straight, and his eyes reflected the lantern light with a brightness that belied his years. "You have entered the garden a second time," he said softly, as if he had expected her. Akiko bowed. "Yes. I felt welcomed." The old man smiled faintly. "Few are welcomed. This place does not open to all. I am Itsuro, keeper of these lanterns." His hand moved gracefully, as though conducting the light itself. The lanterns nearest him swayed in unison, casting shifting shadows across the moss. "What are they?" Akiko asked, her voice almost a whisper. "Lanterns," Itsuro replied, "but not only so. They carry fragments, prayers, memories, even regrets. Each glow is a breath someone once released. The garden gathers them, shelters them. My task is to tend their light." Akiko gazed at the lanterns anew. Their glow felt different now, less like fire, more like the lingering warmth of voices. "And me?" she asked. "Why was I allowed to enter?" The keeper's eyes softened. "Perhaps because you, too, carry a lantern within you, one yet unlit." His words settled in her heart like seeds in soil. She bowed once more, feeling the weight of his gaze and the gentleness of the lanterns around them. That night, when she left the garden, she carried with her the quiet certainty that she was not simply a visitor. She had become part of the hidden glow. Chapter 3: The Floating Lanterns. The following night, Akiko returned, her steps quicker with anticipation. This time, the garden greeted her with more light. Dozens of lanterns floated above the pond, their reflections trembling upon the water. The sight stole her breath, each lantern like a small moon, their glow mingling with the faint stars above. The keeper, Itsuro, stood by the pond's edge, staff in hand. He motioned for her to join him. "Tonight, they float," he said. "The lanterns drift where they will. Some return to the bank. Others vanish beyond the bend of water, never seen again. This is their pilgrimage." Akiko knelt by the edge, watching as the lanterns moved. Some touched and parted, some spun gently, some drifted steadily into the shadows. It felt less like chance, more like a rhythm too subtle for her to hear. She opened her sketchbook, brush in hand. Her strokes followed the movement, not just capturing shape, but the space between, the silence of their drifting. She painted lanterns that glowed faintly on the page, as if her ink had borrowed their light. As she worked, a shadow slipped between the lanterns. The fox shape again, graceful, curious, weaving through the drifting glow. It paused to look at her, tail curling, before darting away. The lanterns parted gently for its passage, as if recognizing it. "Do you see it?" Akiko whispered. The keeper nodded. "Yes. The fox shadow is an old companion of the garden. It tests, it guides. Some chase it, but none ever catch it. Do not chase, only watch." She lowered her brush, letting the image remain unfinished. Her eyes followed the fox shadow until it dissolved into the glow. That night, as the last lantern drifted into the dark, Akiko felt a new resolve. The garden was not merely a place, it was a teacher, one that spoke through light, shadow, and silence. And she would learn its language, one lantern at a time. Chapter 4: The Calligrapher's Gift. On her fourth visit to the garden, Akiko carried with her a small bundle wrapped in indigo cloth. Within lay a brush not her own, but one given to her years ago by the old calligrapher who had first spoken of this hidden place. She remembered his words: "Ink is not only for what is seen, but for what is unseen. Brush lightly, and the silence will reveal itself." That night, the lanterns swayed gently, as if expecting her. The keeper, Itsuro, greeted her with a nod but said nothing more. He seemed to sense that she had brought something important. Akiko knelt on the smooth stones near the pond. She unwrapped the indigo cloth and held the brush reverently. Its bristles were worn, stained with years of ink, yet when she touched it to her scroll, it flowed as though alive. Her strokes were slower now, more deliberate. She painted not the lanterns themselves, but the faint lines of air around them, the space that gave their glow meaning. Where once her hand had rushed to capture form, now it paused to honor absence. The fox's shadow appeared briefly, pausing behind her shoulder. Its tail flicked, scattering leaves across the path. Akiko smiled softly. "I will not chase," she whispered. "I will let you remain as you are." When she finished, she set the scroll upon the stone. In the dim glow of the lanterns, the painted strokes seemed to breathe. Not the shapes of lanterns, but the rhythm of light itself. The keeper approached quietly, his gaze lingering on the work. "The calligrapher's gift has awakened," he said. "Ink carries more than image. Tonight, it has carried silence." Akiko bowed deeply, cradling the brush in both hands. She felt as though the old calligrapher, though long gone, had walked with her into the garden that night. Chapter 5: The Garden in Rain. The following evening brought rain. Akiko hesitated at the gate, uncertain whether the garden would welcome her in such weather. Yet as she stepped through, she found the lanterns glowing more brightly than ever, their flames reflecting in countless droplets clinging to pine needles and moss. The air was rich with the scent of wet earth and stone. Raindrops tapped gently upon the pond, sending ripples outward that broke and reformatted the reflections of the lanterns. She took shelter beneath the pavilion, her sketchbook resting upon her knees. The rain blurred the garden into shifting patterns, lantern light trembling, shadows weaving, koi breaking the surface with sudden rings. Her strokes followed the rhythm of rain. Each mark was a drop, each curve a ripple. She painted quickly, yet with calm, letting the water's pulse guide her hand. The fox's shadow appeared again, more fluid than before. It moved not with steps, but as though it were part of the rain itself, slipping between drops, dissolving, reforming. For a moment, it seemed to bow toward her, its form scattered across the pond's rippling surface. Akiko lowered her brush. She realized she could not paint it, not truly. The rain would never hold still, nor would the fox. Yet in the unfinished strokes, in the spaces where ink had not touched, the essence remained. The keeper's voice came softly from behind her. Rain teaches us that form is always broken, yet always whole. She looked at the lanterns trembling on the pond. None were steady, the ripples fractured all, and yet their light was not lost. It was transformed. That night, when she left the garden, the rain followed her into dreams soft, endless, and filled with light. Chapter 6: The Festival of Shadows. When Akiko returned to the hidden garden on the sixth night, the air held a different weight. It was neither rain nor mist, but a thickness alive with movement, as though countless unseen figures stirred among the trees. The lanterns glowed more vividly, their light painting the moss in amber hues. Yet for every lantern that glowed, there seemed to be a shadow flickering alongside it, moving not as mere absence of light, but with a will of its own. The keeper, Itsuro, awaited her near the pavilion. His staff struck the ground softly, echoing like a drum. "Tonight," he said, "is the Festival of Shadows. Once each season, the lanterns and their shadows gather. Watch closely." At his words, the lanterns swayed in unison. Their shadows lengthened, stretching across the stones, the bridge, and the pond. Slowly, the shadows rose from the ground, like smoke given form. They moved freely, shapes of foxes, cranes, old men, children. Some lingered near the lanterns, others danced across the water. Akiko's breath caught. Are they spirits? The keeper's gaze remained steady. They are memories, shadows of what once was. Some joyous, some sorrowful. They are the other half of light. The fox shadow she had seen before appeared again, but this time it was not alone. Around it flickered smaller shadows, darting playfully through the lantern glow. The fox turned its gaze upon her, eyes gleaming like polished amber, before vanishing into the crowd of shifting forms. Akiko reached for her brush, but her hand trembled. How could ink capture something so fleeting? She steadied herself, letting the brush move not from sight, but from feeling. Her strokes curved, twisted, dissolved, more suggestion than depiction. When she finished, the page seemed almost empty. Yet as the lantern light fell upon it, she saw the faint presence of what she had painted, shadows breathing within the white space, alive in their silence. Itsuro spoke softly. To honor light is easy. To honor shadow, this is where the heart must bend. That night, Akiko left the garden not with fear, but with awe. Shadows, she realized, were not her enemy. They were part of the same whole. Chapter 7: The Moonlit Bridge. The next evening, the moon rose full, casting silver light across the hidden garden. The lanterns glowed softly, but tonight their presence seemed less commanding. The moon's reflection on the pond was a lantern of its own, vast and serene. Akiko walked toward the small wooden bridge that arched across the water. She had crossed it before, but tonight it seemed different, its wood gleaming faintly as though bathed in moonlight from within. As she stepped onto the bridge, she heard no sound of her footsteps. Each plank felt weightless, as though she walked upon air. The lanterns on either side bowed slightly, their glow bending toward the moon. At the center of the bridge, she paused. Beneath her, koi drifted slowly, their scales catching moonlight. The pond's surface reflected both lanterns and sky, blurring boundaries above and below, real and mirrored, all intertwined. The fox shadow appeared at the far end of the bridge. This time, its form was clearer, fur shimmering faintly, eyes bright as the moon. It did not dart or tease. Instead, it stood still, watching her. Akiko bowed deeply. The fox lowered its head in return. For a moment, they shared a silence that felt like a promise. Then the fox turned and slipped into the pines, dissolving into silver mist. When Akiko looked back at the pond, she realized her reflection was no longer her own. Instead, she saw a faint figure of a woman in ancient robes, holding a lantern aloft. The vision lasted only a breath, then dissolved back into water. Her heart pounded. She whispered into the night, "Am I part of this garden now?" The lantern swayed gently, as if answering. As she crossed to the far end of the bridge, Akiko felt lighter, as though something had shifted inside her. The moon, the lanterns, the shadows, they no longer seemed separate. They were a single song, and she was beginning to hear its melody. Chapter 8: The Voice of the Pines. The path beyond the bridge curved deeper into the forest. The lanterns grew fewer here, their light dimming as the pines thickened overhead. The air was cool, carrying the scent of resin and earth. Akiko walked slowly, her brush and scroll tucked beneath her arm. Though the lanterns no longer guided her, she felt the garden itself had opened another path, one meant only for this night. Soon she came upon a clearing where the pines stood tall and unyielding, their trunks like pillars. The wind moved softly through their needles, and for the first time, she realized it was not mere wind. The pines were speaking. Their whispers rose and fell, a language of sighs and murmurs, deep and resonant. Akiko stood still, closing her eyes. At first, the sound was incomprehensible, like voices overlapping. But gradually she sensed meaning, not in words, but in tone. They spoke of age, of centuries rooted in soil. They spoke of storms endured, of snow-bending branches, of spring's renewal. And beneath all, a harmony, a patience deeper than time. Akiko opened her scroll and let her brush move without thought. She painted vertical strokes, tall and firm, then delicate lines branching outward. Between them, she left spaces unmarked, where the whispers seemed to echo. When she finished, the scroll looked simple lines and gaps, nothing more. Yet as lantern light reached it, the strokes seemed alive, vibrating with unseen rhythm. From behind her, the keeper's voice came softly. "The pines have given you their voice. Few listen long enough to hear. Fewer still honor it." Akiko bowed deeply to the trees. She felt as though she had touched something eternal, a rhythm that had flowed since long before her and would continue long after. The pines swayed once more, their whispers carrying her back toward the lantern path. Chapter 9: The Lantern Without Flame. On the 9th night, the garden felt different again. Lanterns glowed as usual, yet Akiko noticed a space near the pond where one lantern stood unlit. Its frame was intact, its paper unbroken, but no flame shone within. Drawn to it, she knelt. The air around it felt cooler, heavier, as though silence itself clung to the lantern. Itzuro approached quietly. "That one has never held a flame," he said. His eyes lingered on it with both reverence and sorrow. "It waits." Akiko frowned. "For what?" "For someone who carries a flame they do not yet know they bear." Her gaze fixed upon the lantern. Though empty, it seemed alive, pulsing faintly in rhythm with her breath. She reached out, but her hand hesitated before touching it. The fox's shadow appeared on the pond's surface, watching. It circled the lantern, its form shimmering, then vanished into the water without a sound. Akiko's heart quickened. She closed her eyes, placing her hands upon the wooden frame. She thought of her brush, her ink, the countless strokes she had made in this garden. Not to capture, but to listen. Not to bind, but to release. Slowly, warmth rose within her chest, quiet, steady, like a flame long hidden. When she opened her eyes, the lantern before her glowed faintly. Itzuro bowed deeply. "It has chosen." Akiko's breath trembled. She had not lit it with fire, nor touched it with ink. And yet, it burned soft, unwavering, as if born from within her. The keeper's voice was hushed. "Some lanterns hold the garden's light. Others hold the light of those who enter. This one will follow you, wherever you walk." That night, Akiko left the garden carrying the glow of the unlit lantern, now burning softly. Its warmth did not fade, even beneath the dark sky. Chapter 10: The Mirror of Still Water. The 10th evening carried a stillness unlike the others. No breeze stirred the branches, no koi broke the surface of the pond. The lanterns hung motionless, their reflections clear and unbroken. Akiko stood at the edge of the water, the newly lit lantern without flame in her hands. Its glow was soft, neither brighter nor dimmer than the others, yet she felt its warmth reach into her chest. The pond stretched before her like a mirror. She expected to see her own reflection, but what looked back was not herself as she knew. She saw a figure robed in white, hair bound with a ribbon of indigo, holding a lantern high. The figure's face was hers, yet older, calmer, her eyes filled with unshakable serenity. Behind her reflection, the lanterns drifted, endless and uncountable, stretching into the distance like stars across the water. Akiko's breath caught. "Is this me?" The keeper's voice came from behind, low and steady. "It is the self you have not yet become. The garden shows not only what you are, but what you may be." Still water reflects more than shape, it reflects possibility. She lowered her gaze, yet the reflection did not vanish. It remained steady as the pond itself. The fox's shadow appeared at the water's edge, tail brushing the surface. Ripples spread outward, distorting the reflection, then calming again. When the water stilled, the reflection had shifted. Now she stood not alone, but among countless others, lanterns in their hands, their faces both familiar and strange. Akiko bowed deeply to the water. She understood. The hidden garden was not only a place of beauty, but of memory, of becoming, of belonging. The lantern in her hand pulsed softly, as though in agreement. Chapter 11: The Pilgrimage of Lanterns. On the 11th night, the garden was alive with motion. Lanterns gathered near the pond, more than Akiko had ever seen before. They hovered close together, swaying gently, as though preparing for a journey. Itsuro stood beside her, staff in hand. His voice was solemn. Once in many seasons, the lanterns take their pilgrimage. They travel beyond the garden, carried by the wind and water. Some return, some never do. This is their path. Akiko clutched her lantern without flame, its glow warm against her palms. "In mine?" she asked softly. The keeper looked at her with eyes that seemed to see far beyond. "Yours will travel with you. But tonight, you must walk among them." The lanterns began to drift. Some rose into the air, floating like fireflies toward the night sky. Others settled upon the pond's surface, carried gently downstream. The garden seemed to hum with their departure, a chorus of countless breaths leaving as one. Akiko stepped into the shallow water. The pond did not resist her, it held her as gently as air. Lanterns brushed past her, their glow touching her sleeves, her hair, her face. She felt them as whispers against her skin, memories of voices, fragments of laughter, sighs of sorrow. One lantern paused before her, brighter than the rest. She reached out, and for a moment it rested in her hands. Within its glow, she saw the faint outline of a child's smile. Then it drifted away, swallowed by the current. Tears welled in her eyes, though she did not know why. The keeper's voice carried across the water. Every lantern carries what must move on. To hold them is to honor, but to release them is to live. As the last lantern vanished into the distance, Akiko stood alone in the pond. Only her own lantern remained, steady in her hands. The fox's shadow appeared once more, standing at the far bank. It bowed to her, then turned and followed the lanterns into the dark, leaving ripples where its paws touched the water. Akiko whispered, "Go well." The garden fell quiet. Yet within that silence, she felt no emptiness. Only harmony, the balance of holding and letting go. Chapter 12: The Keeper's Farewell. The 12th evening came with a pale mist. The lanterns glowed faintly through the haze, their outlines blurred as if painted in water. Akiko entered the garden with a sense of unease, though she could not say why. By the pavilion, Itsuro sat as always, his staff resting beside him. Yet tonight his posture was lower, his breath slower. His eyes still shone, but the strength within them had softened, like embers nearing rest. "You have come far," he said when she approached. His voice was quiet, like the wind moving through reeds. "You have walked among lanterns, honored shadows, and listened to the pines. The garden has shown you its face." Akiko knelt before him, clutching her lantern without flame, which now glowed warmly against her chest. "And you, Master Itsuro, you have guided me. Without you, I would not have understood." The keeper smiled faintly. "I did not guide. The garden did. I was only a voice to remind you where to look." He lifted his staff, though his hand trembled. Every keeper must one day leave the garden to the next. It is not held by stone or wood, but by breath, by the heart of one who listens. Akiko's breath caught. "You mean," Itsuro nodded. "The lanterns have chosen. You will walk their path. You will tend their light." Her eyes blurred with tears. "But I am not ready." "No one is ready," he said gently. "The flame teaches readiness. Trust it." As the mist deepened, the lanterns swayed, their glow bending toward Itsuro. Slowly, his figure seemed to dissolve into the haze, as though he were becoming one with the garden itself. His voice lingered, steady and calm. "Light, shadow, silence, remember. And when you doubt, let the lantern show the way." When the mist cleared, the bench was empty. Only his staff remained, resting across the wood, glowing faintly in the lantern light. Akiko bowed deeply, tears falling to the moss. She whispered, "Thank you," though her voice trembled. The lanterns swayed as if in reply, their glow steady, eternal. Chapter 13: The Lantern Within. The 13th night came, and Akiko felt the garden differently. Without Itsuro's presence, the silence was deeper, yet not empty. It seemed to press closer, as though watching her. She walked to the pond, carrying the staff and her lantern. The lantern glowed warmly, but she realized it was not simply light. It pulsed in rhythm with her breath, her heartbeat, her very being. Kneeling by the water, she placed the lantern upon the surface. It floated gently, its glow reflecting across the pond. Yet even as it drifted, she still felt its warmth within her chest. She closed her eyes. Memories came of her first step through the ivy-covered gate, of the fox's playful gaze, of the calligrapher's brush, of the rain's rhythm, of the pine's whisper. All these were not separate moments but one continuous song, flowing through her. When she opened her eyes, the lantern upon the water had vanished. Yet her hands glowed faintly, her skin touched by light. The fox's shadow appeared once more at the far edge of the pond. It bowed its head, then leapt into the trees, dissolving into starlight. Akiko stood tall, holding the staff. The lantern was no longer an object she carried. It was within her, a flame without flame, a light that neither wind nor water could extinguish. For the first time, she did not feel like a guest. She felt like part of the garden itself, as natural as the moss, as eternal as the pines. The lanterns swayed in unison, their glow bending toward her. A quiet hum filled the garden, as though the very stones and water acknowledged her presence. Akiko whispered into the night, not to Itsuro, not to the lanterns, but to herself. "I will tend the light." And in that moment, the hidden garden no longer seemed hidden. It was alive in her, glowing softly with the harmony of all things. Chapter 14: The Path Beyond the Gate. On the 14th evening, Akiko stood once more before the ivy-covered gate. The garden behind her glowed softly with lantern light, steady and unyielding. The staff of Itsuro rested in her hand, and the warmth of her inner lantern pulsed in rhythm with her heart. She turned to the gate, uncertain. Until now, every path had led her deeper into the garden. Tonight, for the first time, she felt the garden urging her outward. She pushed the gate open. Beyond lay the village of Kagomori, quiet beneath the stars. The streets were dark, yet as she walked, she noticed a change. Where her footsteps touched the ground, faint glimmers of light lingered like tiny lanterns sparking to life. A villager passed, pausing to look at her. His tired eyes softened, his shoulders eased, as though the glow had brushed against him. Another woman carrying water stopped, tilting her head, as if hearing a sound she could not name. Akiko realized then the light of the hidden garden was no longer bound within its walls. It flowed with her, into the world beyond. The fox's shadow appeared briefly at a crossroads, tail flicking playfully, before vanishing into the night. Akiko smiled. It would always walk ahead, unseen, guiding her steps. When she reached the edge of the village, she looked back. The gate was still there, half hidden by ivy, but its glow was faint now, as though retreating. She bowed deeply. "I will return," she whispered. And with the staff in hand and the lantern within, she stepped onto the path that stretched beyond the village, into the vastness of the world. Chapter 15: The Eternal Garden. Time passed, though Akiko could not measure it. Days, months, perhaps years. She walked far beyond Kagomori, through valleys filled with mist, along rivers that glittered in the dawn, across towns where people paused to rest in the glow she carried. Everywhere she went, the light touched others. A child who wept was soothed. An old man found peace in silence. A weary traveler slept more soundly beneath the lantern's warmth. She never forced it, never named it, she simply let it flow, as the garden had taught her. And yet, the hidden garden never left her. In dreams, she still walked its paths, still painted its lanterns, still heard the pines whisper. Sometimes she awoke to find dew upon her sleeves, or the faint scent of moss lingering in her room. One night, beneath a wide sky of stars, she closed her eyes and felt the presence again: the still pond, the swaying lanterns, the fox's gaze. But now, she understood the garden was not a place apart. It was within her, eternal, wherever she carried the flame. She whispered, "The lantern glows, and the garden lives." At that moment, the stars above seemed to shimmer more brightly. A breeze stirred, carrying the scent of pine and rain. She opened her eyes and saw the reflection of lanterns dancing across the surface of her own tears. The garden was not hidden. It was here. It was everywhere. Akiko raised Itsuro's staff, bowing to the unseen presence that had guided her from the beginning. "I will keep tending the light," she said. "So long as the lantern burns, the garden will never fade." And the night, vast and silent, answered with a glow that seemed endless: lanterns upon lanterns, drifting into eternity. Epilogue: lanterns without end. Seasons shifted, though Akiko no longer counted them. She walked beneath cherry blossoms that scattered like snow across fields. Golden with autumn grain, through winter nights where frost glittered like hidden stars. Wherever she went, she carried the stillness of the hidden garden, and wherever she paused, people felt its presence. Her lantern no longer needed flame. It glowed within her, quiet and steady, like the pulse of life itself. Children reached toward it with wide eyes, elders bowed in gratitude, travelers felt rested simply by her passing. She never claimed to be a keeper, never spoke of the garden's secrets. The light itself was enough. And yet, those who felt it often dreamed of a place: a mossy path, a still pond, a fox's watchful gaze, and lanterns swaying gently in the dusk. They could never say where it was, or how they had seen it, but they awoke with peace in their hearts, as though they too had walked there. Akiko came to understand then the hidden garden had never belonged only to her, nor even to Itsuro. It lived wherever harmony was tended, wherever silence was honored, wherever a lantern glowed in the heart. One evening, while resting beneath an ancient cedar, she looked up at the sky. Lanterns seemed to float among the stars, their light unbound by walls or gates. She smiled, realizing the truth at last. The garden was never hidden. It was always here, within and around, waiting to be seen. She rose, lifting the staff lightly, and whispered into the night. "So long as there is one who tends the light, the lanterns will never fade." The wind stirred, carrying her words into the distance. Somewhere, a child saw a glow along a forgotten path. Somewhere, an old man heard the faint laughter of a fox. Somewhere, a traveler felt their burden ease as lantern light bloomed in their chest. Akiko walked on, her steps neither hurried nor slow, her path without end. And in the silence between breaths, the world itself seemed to hum with the song of the garden lanterns glowing softly, endlessly, without end.